This is the Page Publishing Book Club. How you doing? I'm Alice Stockton Rossini. H. Mikhail Phelan was a professional ballroom dancer in Reno, Nevada for 40 years. He taught, competed, owned a school, and then decided it was time to write about his epilepsy, which he has battled for most of his life. And seizures, he says, are just the tip of the iceberg.
The characteristics that come along with epilepsy, i.e. depression, some people even become bipolar. There's actually a plethora of other characteristics that come along with epilepsy. The other parts, that are actually more difficult to deal with, because a seizure, you're not awake for it. You have to go through the aftermath and suffer the slings and arrows, so to speak. But it's when you're awake and when you're depressed and when you can't get out of it and when you're being irrational and you don't know why. And you find out, well, you have a brain disorder. Yeah. So if you can help people, guess what? I got through it. And I got through it in a tough time. When 1970, you were a freak. I mean, 50 years earlier, if you were epileptic, you were in a home the feeble-minded.
You're right. I mean, that's just so hard to believe because it's not that long ago.
No, it's less than 100 years ago.
Yeah. Were you writing this in your head all along? And
I started writing for therapy. Okay. Because one of the characteristics, you can get rage, purple rage. I had dealt with that all my life, where you get just angry and you can't stop it. It's almost like a seizure, but you can't stop it. But my doctor said, you can control this. Start writing about it. So I did. And as I wrote, the art in it is, you look at it and go, oh my, he does have a brain disorder. It's quite bizarre. A friend of mine said that it's abstract cartooning, but with a twist. The thing is many people who have epilepsy do have a flair for the arts, whether it be drawing or painting or poetry or dancing or whatever. Michelangelo was supposedly was epileptic.
So we go on this journey with you.
Yeah, it's more of like, this is how it started for me. This is what it felt like back in 1970 to wake up, after having a seizure in high school, in country school in Nebraska, going, what happened? And they were telling me that I had an epileptic seizure, and I felt like a freak. Back then, you were, in a sense. And then as I go along, I also try to explain how everything starts with perspective, and then that dictates your attitude. And once you get your right perspective on that, yeah, you have epilepsy, but that is not who you are. That is what you have. You're a person. Never let that hold you back. And if you do it that way, if you look at it that way, then you can put a different attitude towards it.
Excellent advice. Thank you so much. Shelley McPherson always wrote as a child, but she started writing Shadows of Truth Awakening about 10 years ago after she could not shake a very scary dream and then realized she was dealing with a nightmare of her own.
It was very weird. It was very technicolor in some spots, and some spots were black and white. It just stayed with me when I woke up the next morning. So I wrote it down, and then I showed one of my good friends. I let her read it, and she was like, oh my goodness, you really should try writing this out. And a couple days later, I was thinking about it. And so I just started writing, and it just turned into its own little story based off Sumerian mythology. And it's about Illyria, who thinks she's just living this simple life with her family and her best friend, but then doesn't realize there's this whole other world that's searching for her, because she's the final fate, and whoever controls her controls basically how everything's going to go in the world. It was set in motion when the Sumerian gods were having an internal battle for this ultimate power. And then Namu, who's the main one, she decides, that enough of this, too many lives are being lost. And she sacrifices herself to initiate this legend. I think what helped with this book, what inspired me to write it so much, besides that dream, was the fact that I kind of wrote out my own demons and insecurities in it and called myself out on things.
Like what?
Like it's hard to believe in yourself at times. Just things, you always put that lovely either duct tape or super glue into your parts when you fall apart and you don't necessarily let yourself heal and heal the right way. You just kind of keep super gluing and duct taping so you can keep on moving forward. I wanted to finally stop and face everything and just be like, okay, here we go. You're going to write it all out, call yourself out on things, and heal properly and acknowledge, your insecurities. So that way they're not insecurities anymore.
Is there anything in particular that writing this book helped you work out or work through?
Belief in myself, a little depression, kind of silencing all those little negative voices that you get in your head when you're depressed and not dealing with things. And I lost twins probably about 9 years prior that I never really dealt with properly and kind of just hid it back. And then I wasn't able to have kids anymore. So it kind of like came full circle about everything. So I kind of shut down.
Well, that's sure understandable.
Yes. But I never gave it that. I kind of just left it as everybody goes through stuff like this. It's no big deal. I never let myself mourn it, deal with it, face it, and heal with it. And so it just kind of snowballed a lot of other things in life where I just kind of didn't trust myself, didn't believe in myself. And then that way I kind of just moved forward with calling myself on that, keep pushing it back and just be like, okay, let's bring it to the forefront. Let's deal with it. Let's see what happens.
So this was therapy for you?
Yes. In some ways, yes, it was. But if I'm able to touch anybody else with this story, if anything I can learn out of life, if I can share it with somebody else and it might help them a tiny bit, that would be worth it.
All right, Shelley, then it will happen. Keep the faith. Erath Micaiah was a stair cutter, roof cutter in Texas when he decided to go back to school to become an electrical engineer. That took 9 years. Then he decided to become a doctor, which took almost 10. And now, author. Why not? He wrote Interregnum, the Final Dispensation, 25 years ago.
Yeah. I'm a Walter Mitty. It's the expressive side of me, obviously. But I came back to the Lord in '86 out of the whole super hyper liberal movement, which is not to say I'm a dyed-in-the-wool conservative, but I left behind a lot of that stuff. And then I encountered this thing in Christianity that was a prosperity movement and the pre-trib rapture, which was focus on physical wealth. And then when anything gets anywhere near hard, God's going to take us out of here, which is actually exactly the nature of God, because God puts his people through hardship to purify them. So I became very disgusted when I was in a church that was totally prosperity. It's just avarice completely. And they were going over to Heritage USA, Jim Baker. So I saw the writing on the wall there, and I just said, this is garbage. This is not Christianity. So this came out of that, where I tried to give an expression of what sacrificial Christianity was all about, the suffering servant of Isaiah 53. And it's about people laying down their lives for Christ, not people becoming wealthy and living in mansions. And so there's a place in there where I go through two characters, Pastor Art and Brother Brent, and in them I do kind of a hyperbole of that whole movement, and I use it to show what this really is. What happened also, I got old in that time period, and I know this sounds impossible, but when I was 4 years old, my concept of life was that there was love and there was freedom, that they were diametrically opposed. So I've always had this thrust to figure out from a philosophical standpoint, what is human romantic love? And then how does it change as we mature? So I put in there two people that had a romance when they were young, then they re-encountered each other and reignited that romance in the like 60s kind of thing.
Okay.
So it has all of that Christian stuff and struggle, but basically it's a story of two romances. It's a wonderful, hopeful thing on second romance.
Okay.
It's like Frank Sinatra, love is better the second time around. Remember that song?
So let me ask you this. You're doing this under a pen name. How are you going to promote your book?
I'm not. I figure I wrote it and that's God's job. And I just feel like God's given me all these talents, and there's a whole lot of people out there in the world that are suffering that need my talent, you know. And I'm a good surgeon, and so there's just a lot of people out there in the third world that I'd like to be able to affect with the gifts God's given me.
Well, you know what? You go for it, Erath. You are something else. Thank you. Michael Clark works in health and safety consulting, does marketing for radio companies, puts together a community magazine for his Colorado neighborhood, and now he's an author who collaborated with his niece on his first published book entitled Missy's Green Ball.
Missy was an old Australian Shepherd, beautiful dog, and I was her third family here at the cabin. She was with the first family here who built the place. And when the first family moved away, they tried to take her with them. She kept running back to the cabin. So she adopted into the second family that moved here. And when they moved away and I moved in and they told me the story, and of course I said, of course she can stay. So she kind of adopted me. So she had been here all along, and she had this green ball the size of a large cantaloupe melon, if you will. It was kind of heavy, and it was her play ball. And when I moved in, she was probably 13-ish years old or so. Then that green ball had since been discarded, had a big hole in it, and tucked away in a little corner behind a bush in the corner of the cabin under the main window outside. I came home after work one night. It was just after dusk and some red sky in the background. And she had passed away a couple of days before this. And when I came home that night, her ball was standing in the middle of the driveway where she had always come to wait for me when I came home.
Wow.
And it was just one of those slap in the forehead moments and jaw dropping. And it was in a place where the wind wasn't going to get to it. I had a broom and a shovel standing on the porch. So I reasoned it couldn't have been the wind. Only conclusion, as surreal as it might be, was that she had to put it there somehow.
Do you still feel her presence in the cabin?
Every so often, but she was more an outside dog all the time. It's been several years. I think she's probably moved on, but it was just surrealistic that night. I had posted that on Facebook when I just had to take the next day off and written something up about it that night, March 4th, 2013. I had friends comment back on the Facebook post and say, yeah, they get it. They understand.
Well, what do you think it means?
I got to believe was her saying, thanks for taking care of me, and that she's kind of around in a sense. And that she was doing okay.
I guess people know you wrote this book.
Yeah. We had a signing at a Barnes & Noble in Grand Junction. We had a lot of people come by and just ask about it. And quite frankly, the story brings a tear to everybody's eye.
Yeah.
It's a happy tear to everybody's eye. I like to think it's a happy tear. And even when your favorite pet passes away, they still think about you.
Yeah.
They're still there. Even though this was a real story, it happened to me. I cast it in terms of my niece. She had known Missy also, and come to love Missy. And it just made sense to make it a children's book, although it's really for kids of all ages. Anyone who's lost a pet.
I agree, Michael. For dog lovers everywhere. Very cool story. Thank you. It is break time on the Page Publishing Book Club. Stay with us.
Have you written a book and want to get it published? Then now's the time to call Page Publishing at 800-204-6099 and do it immediately. You see, they're looking for authors of all types of books. And unlike most publishers, Page Publishing will take the time to review most of the books submitted to them. And they'll even give you their feedback. And if they like what they read, Page Publishing will get your book into bookstores and for sale online at Amazon, the Apple iTunes Store, and other outlets. They'll handle everything: copyright protection, printing, cover art, publicity, and editing. So if you've written a novel, a children's book, a cookbook, inspirational work, a book of poetry, or biography, and want to get it published, then you need to call Page Publishing and do it immediately. Call 800-204-6099 now for your free author submission kit. Your road to fame and fortune could very well start with this simple phone call. For your free author submission kit, call Page Publishing at 800-204-6099.
We are back on the Page Publishing Book Club. I'm Alice Stockton Rossini. Courtney Alexander Williams is an airport driver in Connecticut, and in between trips, he's writing about love. This is his second book in a trilogy entitled From Africa with Love.
I was in Africa. I could see the animals was running around, and you could see the skyline and the horizon, and the moonlight was shining as a glass right across the horizon. And it was so clear, crystal, silver lining of the lights, and I start thinking about it, and I said, thinking about it just like that, and then I had a dream twice in the same week about it. And the story is Nawasi is meaning spiritual, and Tajoki is meaning God-given talent. He was in New York pursuing his dreams. He left his gem behind, which is Nawasi. She was a school teacher, and she was there for 6 years in New York. She's been writing him constant letters, and he replying to her letters, and she wasn't receiving them because her father confiscated the letters. Her father loved her dearly, and she loves her dad as well because she's the only child. And when Chijoki went home to see her, he went to her and she said, "What happened? Why aren't you replying to my letters?" He said, "Yes, I did reply your letters." And she said, "I haven't received any." And come to find out, her dad was the one that kept taking the letters. And she says to him, she'd rather die a virgin more than to see another man. And he could see the pain in her eyes as if she was giving birth to his love. And because of that, it breaks down the relationship between the father, the mother, and the daughter. They still got married regardless. He went and apologized to her. He apologized to himself. He apologized to his wife. And he apologized to the rest of the marriage party and his friends. What you're going to find out about this book, the pain that is in this book and the pain that transferred to the love, and how people can go through a lot of pain and it turns to all love, which it's the true love about this, regardless of the situation of more or less of the pain. Then how one find out that says, "Oh, it was so much pain, and I hate this fella, and I won't think I'm gonna go back to him. I will continue the relationship." But it turned out to love, and everybody comes to be, and they married to her, and they settle down and have a family. If somebody's getting married, they should read this book. If somebody's in love, they should read this book. If somebody's engaged, they should read this book. And most of all, if somebody is getting a divorce, they should read this book. That will transfer the life of such. And we'll be having a book signing at the Writers Inc. in Bloomfield, Connecticut. I know it, just like I wrote the book, I believe it's going to turn into a picture. I believe it's going to turn into a picture. Yes. From Russia with Love with Sean Connery.
Right.
And from Paris with Love with John Travolta, same way. And there's no From Africa with Love. So I think it just fits in right there.
All right, Courtney, you might be onto something. Thank you. Kevin Bookman is a meat manager for a department store in Georgia. He writes while relaxing in the tub. His English lit teacher always told him he should write, but he never followed through until now. His inspiration is superhero movies, and the name of his book, Beyonders, Volume 1, Genesis.
We felt that people of color wasn't represented throughout a lot of these movies and comics and books and everything. So we wanted to make it more diverse. So we started creating a diversity of characters to represent our universe, gave them certain abilities and created a world where they are feared and hated because of these abilities. And because of how powerful they are, the governments of the world united to form one government. And the main thing was they feared that if they didn't control these beyonders, is what my characters are called, the diverse universe of enhanced beings. And so the world, the normal world, felt like if they didn't control these beyonders, that they would eventually take over the world and that the human race would be wiped out. So these governments formed and they put a task force together that they can do whatever they want to. And their main goal is to police these beings. And beyonders have no rights. They can be executed for jaywalking. You know, any violation of any law is punishable by death. Some of them are so powerful that even the task force can't deal with them. So they actually have a secret weapon that they use, and it's a bounty hunter. They send him out after the ones that are too powerful for them to deal with, and they don't realize that he himself is a beyonder. He's actually a werewolf, basically unkillable, and his bite is deadly to anything. So he always finds who they send him after. So he ends up running across my most powerful beyonder, which his name is Nero Aureli, who is a 400-year-old African king that absorbed this radiation from a meteor that struck his homeland. His kingdom was overthrown, and he was forced to go into this mountain where this legendary orb had crashed all those centuries ago and retrieve it. And when he did, he ended up receiving the energy within, which is like a living energy. It chose him to be its host and granted him 100% control of his brain capacity. So anything he can think of, he can do. My whole Beyonder universe revolves around this one character because he's the all-powerful being.
And this is a 5-part series.
Yes, and I'm also working on a movie right now. We've got Russians, we've got Asians, we've got Haitians, we've got Jamaicans, we've got Hispanics, we've got everything. we want everybody to be represented.
All right, Kevin, you're right. Everyone should be represented. Thank you. Nina Unchainen is a manager for the International Currency Exchange at Vancouver International Airport, and she swears she did not decide to write about her cat Lucky in her book, Lucky the Cat's Book of Poetry. She had no choice.
I love writing and reading. It was kind of always my thing, and it just happened to write about Lucky because he became part of our life in 97. Somebody else adopted him, but left him with us, and he lived with us for 16 and a half years after that. So
Now, this is a book of poetry?
yes, it's all about Lucky. We kind of called it his adventures, but in reality, it's actually my own point of view of many things through my cat's eyes, and it's actually very inspiring and very challenging and fun.
So the computer guy was written after Lucky was chasing a cursor with his paw.
Yes, that was very funny thing to watch, and then it just inspired me to write a poem, and mouse, of course, you have cat and you have mouse, and mouse is, computer thing. So, yeah, some poems, people who write, they know that sometimes they write things right there, and it's right thing they write. Sometimes they struggle, to find right words, right way to finish it. But that one was actually written inspiration was right there, and it was written, and nothing ever changed. Lots of things later on you read, what you write, and then you don't like it, you change it. But that one, I never changed anything because it was just written right there in a matter of minutes, and one of my favorite. That's why it's in my first book.
Okay. And we have Lucky the meteorologist.
I don't know what's the weather in New York now, but here it's raining like crazy in Vancouver. And they say, okay, it's going to rain, but it's a sunny day. Or it's going to be sunny and it was raining. They actually, we learned later that there are air streams in this area, and it's kind of very hard to predict whether or not is that true, I don't know. But the expression, it's raining like cats and dogs, that was very inspiring. When I learned about that, I had to write that, put that in one of my poems. So, yeah.
Is Lucky still with you?
No, Lucky passed away on May 17th, 2013. He was 17 years old. He is here with us. His ashes are here in our house. His pictures are everywhere. He's a big part of our life still. Yeah, we have Becky now, another cat. She's also one of the characters in a book. In Tiana poem, he's mentioned, and also Max. That was another cat who used to live with us, but that's a friend's cat. We took care of him for 2 years. And Winnie, also a small dog. That's my daughter's dog. They're all part of our family, and they're all mentioned in some poems that are not published yet, but will be. But they're mentioned in Tiana poem. That's the third poem in the first book, dedicated to my daughter. Yes, and with a good message, with positive energy. That's what it is.
All right, Nina, thank you. Yuka Atto lives just outside Chicago, where he did police work, and when his wife found out about his past, she encouraged him to write about it in his book entitled My Story.
It's about my life south when I was born down in Greenwood, Mississippi, during the Jim Crow era. And, just everything it just came to me from time to time. I would be inspired. So I said, maybe I should. And I thought about my wife, it's a great contribution to her. And so I just said it daily, because sometimes I didn't write a word in months. So that's why it took so long. I just had to be in the groove. And I figured that if I could write, talking to anybody, at least for me, think about something that something about yourself was the easier way for me. Now for some, it may be different, but for me, it just, I had to put it in writing and my legacy. So if I was wrongly convicted I got out of jail. So I returned back to Chicago. And so I went right into college because actually I started out at the University of Southern Illinois. I was taking some courses. So anyway, fast forward ahead, I came back here to Chicago. And I said, boy, I sure like to tell my story because nobody going to tell but me. And I was inspired about other things that I read about, people and places and all that stuff. So I always wanted it. And so the wife, like I said earlier, she the one who really pushed it because she told me that in the court of her passing. I said, oh man, I got to do something. So I didn't know it would lead to this, but I'm glad it did. People's coming from my background, my informal learning. I think anyone read that book, they could be inspired to write. And it's anybody. By the way, I didn't even finish elementary school somehow. I don't know how that happened, but it happened. So I just think that to anybody read it, they could be inspired, and if they want to write something, if I could write it, I think anybody could write it. They can't, then they can dictate it to someone else, and they could do the writing. That's my aim. That's my objective. That's my wish.
Well, it's a good one, Yuka. Thank you so much. And thank you for joining us. That is a wrap for this edition of the Page Publishing Book Club. Listen, if you want to listen again and again and again, just go to 710WOR.com and download the podcast. All of our shows are right there. There are more authors where these guys came from. When will one of them be you, huh? Let me know. I'm Alice Stockton Rossini.